Welcome into the SMITE Open Circuit, and because of where we are here, Gore, we're moving in to the closed bracket, so these teams can try and play to see who can be the one to make it in to those circuit playoffs. So everything that this SOC teams have been working towards is starting to culminate right here and now. Of course, my name is Finch. I'm joined here by Will, Goremizer, Newberry, Young Midoriya. I don't know what to call you over there, Gore. What are you doing, bud? What do you have for me on your side of things?
Man, I'm excited to watch this. This is the matchup. If you haven't been watching the open circuit, well, you're not missing, I guess, too much because we saw it in week 1, we saw it again in week 3, now we're seeing it again in week 4. The only reason it didn't happen in week 2 is for some reason Spreed got first rounded. It was very weird to have them get knocked out, I think, in that week as early as they did. But so far, both of these teams, between the two of them, have just been dominating quite literally everybody this phase.
Yeah.
For phase 4, it hadn't been much of a contest. It really has just been these two teams. The one week that somebody else made it through, it was the one team that was able to beat Spreed. And I think they are the only team in the open circuit so far that has done that, because so far Mind the Gap has been 2-0'd every time by them.
They have been struggling to try and stop Spreed. Tons of talent here that could obviously be in the SCC. I mean, some of this talent was in the SPL, right? Solar Troll,
Yeah.
obviously, who I'm thinking of specifically when I bring that up. So I don't think it's really anything bad against Mind the Gap that they've struggled here. It's a really good team that they happen to be running into here with Spreen. Now, as usual, we're joining this in the finals, where, as usual, it's Spreen and Mind the Gap, where, as usual, I think Spreen have to be the favorites in this one, but I'm not saying that that doesn't mean that Mind the Gap can't find a way to get a win here.
Yeah, that's the thing that's always interesting about these is the first time these two teams played, things seemed pretty close. I will admit, the last time these two teams played, SOT just it was a monster. It was a menace, I think, that came through. I can't remember if it was across both games or if it was just straight up in one game, got 30 kills. That's ludicrous to think about. So maybe there's something to be changed here for Mind the Gap. But at this point, you've got history playing each other, so you might as well maybe ban out some of those target bans. I'd be interested to see if something comes out like that to try and control either Guy J or SOT to maybe stop them from being as effective.
They're going to need something to slow those two down, right? Because they are the thorns in the side of everybody here, the SOC at least right now, not the SEC. That's where they're playing for right now to get a chance to challenge some of those SEC teams if they can move on here. So let's take a look at these bans here already. I think the Cupid ban, Hercules ban, Persephone ban is fairly standard. This Wheelish ban, though, a bit more of a targeted one towards Spreen and towards SOT. Now remember, SOT, as his name implies, was a solo laner up in the SPL. I'm sure you guys remember, but down here, he's been taking the jungle by storm. Give your most impactful player the most impactful role, and that's a recipe for the success that Spreen has had up until now.
I thought you were about to drop because he's no longer solo, he's trolling every game, and it just happens to work out for him. I don't know. Maybe that is the case. Either way, it's been solid for him. That's an interesting number, though. I just saw 100% win rate on Wukong. Granted, it's only one game, but I think that's always fun to watch over when you get to see things like that. Although I think because I'm seeing now Rom with 2 games played, this is pulling maybe more from what this specific bracket was bringing, these playoffs that they have, quote-unquote, that they have. Since it's a closed bracket, you get things that are very solid. Wukong being good, I think, in solo lane, but Rom Kuzenbo, at least in my eyes, Finch, I don't know. That's something I would take 10 times out of 10, especially when you go back to it. You had mentioned Guy J being in the Pro League. One of the things we saw E United do when they found some success, they looked really good, was first picking Rom for Guy J. And so I think that can be nothing but positive here for Spree.
The crazy thing is that Spreen hasn't even had to call Guy J's number that often, right? I mean, he oftentimes makes his way into the game, and it's already largely in their side already. So if it ends up coming down to it, that's yet another problem that you have to worry about, right, is how strong Guy is on this pick. Now, over here, though, we're noticing that it's the Cerberus Wukong Raw pickup. Cerb is something we've seen Baskin playing a lot up in the SPL. Mike has played it some in the support role as well. I don't know that I'm 100% sold on this pick in particular, Gore, but Stygian Torment has had some success. The passive is good, too. I mean, I think this Cerberus pick can work.
So I was in the same boat as you. I was very much on the fence about Cerberus until I think it was either last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I'm pretty sure I saw Mike like 100-0 somebody, and most of it was from hitting the stun at the very beginning. And I was just like, oh, right, like Cerberus, he does damage still. And I think that's something that he's going to have coming into this, is if you build the right itemization, you can kind of mess around with it. He's pretty tanky as is. And if you're feeling aggressive, if you're Mind the Gap here and you are able to get a lead, you could build maybe one kind of flex damage item on him, like something like a Void Stone maybe, to go in there to give you that little bit of a bump that you need, and he will absolutely make, you know, Erlang Shin, Rom in this case, have a very, very rough time, because otherwise, I mean, they're looking for setup damage, right? It's a lot of good lockdown. It brings them right into one spot where Ra can snipe, and that kind of combo is going to be solid. But for the most part, I think Cerberus he's sold me enough that I'm not surprised to see him going into the top.
But can't you already see a bit of a difference forming here between these two drafts? You have Spreen, who are drafting to fight, right? All of these picks with the ability to start being combative, even on their own, right from early on in the game, and some decent CC immune ultimates. Meanwhile, I felt as though on the other side we were seeing a bit more of a team fight presence, but this set is anything but, right? This is someone who's got tons of dive potential on his own and who can get back there and punish some low mobility targets. I don't know who his best target is right now, but we've seen Set do well. And it's not going to be the Set ADC that we've come to expect from, like, the Cyclone Spins of the world. Instead, looks like that's going to be in Layers' hand for more traditional Set jungle.
Yeah, it's because of Cyclone Spin and Binny Q. I'll have to give him the shout-out because he deserves it. I saw Set locked in, looked at the rest of the comp prior to Jingwei, and was like, oh, man, this is going to go over to the carry, isn't it? I was like, this is going to be something in the long lane. I wonder how that's going to work, because sometimes it's hit, sometimes it's miss. But then with Jingwei there, it's going to be matching up. Instead against the Erlang Shin, I'm going to be honest, I don't know if that makes it easier or harder for this set overall at the end of the day. The weakest parts I think that Spreed are bringing into this is the Kukulkan and the Scylla. I think both of those maybe are a little easier to control, but Kukulkan up against Wukong is what I'm going to assume for the solo lane matchup. I don't think he's going to suffer a lot there, and I don't think Scylla is going to be hurting too much by this Ra. He should have a little bit faster clear online a little sooner. But Erlang Shin should make up for a lot of the pressure Scylla might lose. And otherwise, I see Erlang Shin, Kuzenbo, Rom, and I think I'm going all in on that just because that is a very, very deadly combo. Late game, I mean, the displacement and the damage that they can do is ridiculous.
It's going to be difficult to deal with that if you're trying to go up against the Spreed roster, right? And remember that there's no Amaterasu pick or band here, right? That I'd make the argument that Amaterasu is a tier and a half above Kukulkan on Amaterasu's worst day, and still I think this Kukulkan is going to end up looking good. So take that into consideration when you're watching this gameplay. Game number 1, though. Let's get ready to kick this off and head right on into the action. Remember, we're here in week 4. These teams trying to make their way through to qualify for those circuit playoffs. And we'll see if they get the chance to do that here. Everything went where we expected it to. No big surprises there, Gore. So we'll just get to see how these two teams end up matching up.
And I'm excited to see how this just kicks off, only because I feel like we've seen this game simultaneously, again, be a little more methodical between these two teams. We've seen it be the opposite, where it was you know, arena gameplay on a conquest map. So we'll have to see if we can get, maybe I want to say strike the middle, right? That's where the SCC usually is like right down the middle. They're playing a methodical arena-esque gameplay. They like to fight a lot, I think, in the NA North American scene. So either way, I'm just excited to see what they're able to bring here. Solar Troll has to be the one we're keeping our eyes on just because he's the one who's had kind of a ridiculous run so far here in Phase 4, but I think the duo lane's going to be very important. There's a lot of little details in this one that I think are going to make some big differences.
I'm thinking so too, right? You're thinking about how well Solar Troll and Spreen can play in this middle lane, right? That's an easy enough combo. The root from Solar Troll into the crush from Spreen. As long as they're consistently doing that, Layers, Crimson, and Quig are going to struggle here in this mid. But then in the other direction, you're thinking, is Quig going to get involved here early? So he could be setting up for Crimson to hit these snipes and such. If those sort of combos, if that setup for these mid laners is there, for whichever team it's there more often, I think we're looking towards the winner, right? Who is allowing Spreen or Crimson to have a better game?
And that's actually interesting because I look down at Relics right now, and I see a jungler with beads, and my mind would almost go to SOT maybe needing it to try and avoid lockdown coming from Quig when he joins that fight. But it's actually Layers that has it, and there is going to be a significant amount of lockdown, I think, that is going to find his way. When Scylla's on the other side, you don't want to get anywhere near that route. Sikkim locking you down, especially early on with a Crush and an Erlang next to you, like you said, is enough to get you very far ahead and start popping off. But I also think it's interesting that he's invested so heavily on that, whereas Solar Troll is going to be running with the Blink, maybe allowing him to get a little more aggressive and maybe be the one who helps set up that Scylla a little more often. Just being able to close that gap between him and Ra a lot faster.
Yeah, I think it does seem to be an indication, Gore, of which jungler is planning to be a bit more aggressive sooner. And I think no surprise that it's SOT on the Erlong Shen. Still rocking the splice tag, I suppose, when SOT was with them, as he takes quite a bit of damage, but no danger of actually falling up against Wolves. But look at this rotation over from SOT. Might be looking for a punish. Ping comes through from Heed, but I think Wolves spotted out. Should be okay with Heed this far away, but the exposed weakness coming out anyway, or spot weakness, and Solo or Troll goes right back over to the Totem of Ku. Some pressure, though, on the right side of the map from SOT. He's getting involved already, as he's looking to see if maybe there could be a bit of a blue buff invade coming through. Nope, gives up on that as well. Okay, doesn't get much at all there. And instead will join the duo.
Oh, he's jumping back in, Finch. He sees it, put a ward down.
Oh, he
Here's
wanted
his
the
back
jungle
over
to
here.
be
They're going to be looking for the fight.
I get it. He wanted to make sure that the set was here so that it would be a harder fight. I understand. And that means he ends up falling for first blood. Now, what about Heed? Perhaps he could find a return kill, but he missed his first of his first abilities. He has to jump in to get the kill and sets up for Layers to get the return kill. I understand. You want to stop the enemy jungler for farming, Gore, but I don't know.
Now, realistically, this is a dangerous game. Now, Wolves is, I think, the furthest ahead as the only one who doesn't die over on that side of the map, so he's going to be able to come out. And that's a scary thought, letting Wolves have any amount of control. Although, ultimately, with respawn timers, they're both going to make it back to lane around the same time, and I believe they were able to strip away that blue buff from them as well. So even though you don't necessarily get the kill advantage, you didn't stop him, ultimately, and now Heed will have a blue buff where Wolves doesn't. So there's a little bit of an advantage there. I'm also really interested in it because Solar Troll, I mean, was able to fight there, do a lot of damage there. And that was prior to any items, realistically. I mean, he had that tier 1 still. He backed, or I guess died, and got the boots. And so that's where Erlong really starts to shine, is when those auto-attack items get to come online that really start to make the difference. Stone-Cutting Sword has been a very large first item. Chin size has been big in the build as well. And so I think there's something to be said that if Solar Troll is doing this much damage and willing to get that aggressive this soon, it might only get scarier here for Mind the Gap as he gets more empowered.
Could be difficult to deal with this Erlong Shen. I mean, we know that it will be from watching Erlong Shens in the past, but it's a good rotation from Layers to show up over in right to make sure that that blue buff didn't get invaded. It's just too long from SOT, right? He walks into lane, shows some presence, can't find anything. Then he starts working on the Totem of Ku. Then he walks to blue buff, walks away, walks back. That was plenty of time for Layers to rotate over. It's not like if Layers zoomed over there, had a great mind-blowing rotation. It's just that SOT was on right for a while, and Wolves brought it up, I assume, and Layers said, all right, I'll come over there, and they were able to find a couple of kills on that right side of the map to work for him, as looks like a purple buff invade is in the cards here for Spreed and the boys. Trying to come over and ship that away, and SOT is back looking for blue again, but not able to steal it. Instead, he'll take a fight with Layers in the jungle. Tiger Stun comes out first, and SOT now low, ends up getting crushed by the Cudgel. And these are very odd decisions by SOT, if I'm being honest about it. Now Heed low as well, but good repositioning with the first ability, and he is A-okay.
Yeah, it's a bold strategy, right, to just go over to this side of the map and give Wukong and Layers as many kills as they want. But we'll have to see if it works out for him, or if eventually it changes over. I mean, again, maybe you can look at it positive light. He just gets to back by his boots and then go over towards the speed buff. So theoretically, I guess he's just min-maxing his positioning on the map. And instead of having to waste all that time backing, he'll just die. Either way, it is a little interesting to see it just because he's getting, I think, hyper-aggressive in a position where he's already behind. For a second there, it was level 5 to level 7, so he's a little under 2 levels behind, but just over 1 level behind here compared to Layers. And that's not going to be comfortable, like, unless you can get some really solid rotations from Heed or Spreen. I don't think you take that fight a third time, or maybe he's telling himself third time's the charm and he's going to seek it out once more just to see if maybe it changes.
I'm surprised Solo was the focus there from him. Certainly should have known there were two there. Had the information, I think, from Heed. No one was in lane, and at least saw Layers doing blue. So wanted the isolated fight with Layers, but instead got a 2v1. Quig not quite able to find the Stygian Torment there on the SOT that I was looking for. So yeah, middle of the map looking a bit better for SOT. I think he might stick around over here as they defended their red buff just a little while ago, and they have successfully invaded the purple, as we discussed earlier. I do want to see if maybe Spreed, as a squad, want to get there again. We'll be able to tell, I think, by Blugan's positioning, but that appears to not be a priority for them. This time, Griff gets to his purple buff on time, defends it, and Spreed now have kind of lost that invade cycle they were on, but I don't think they particularly wanted to keep it. It's hard to repeatedly invade purple without a bunch of presence over there.
Yeah, and honestly, with the fact that Solar Troll, I think this is the first time I've really gotten to see him on the left side of the map, it's not necessarily something that you need the pressure on. Guy J's already got a little bit of a lead, even if it's just a smidge, and actually he's kind of behind in stacks. So maybe there's an experience lead from stripping away purples. Maybe there's really not overall. Griff doing a great job of keeping up. But for the most part, I mean, this is something that maybe we say too much. It makes it sound like the role doesn't get as much done. There's a lot that I think goes into this side of the map. But both Guy J and Griff are just going to be hanging out farming for a little while.
That's nice, Go. Everyone else says ADCs are autopiloting. It's the easiest lane. It's freeform. But you know the truth that we ADCs are out there.
Dude, one-on-ones are hard.
Making it work.
I'm not kidding. Like, I hate playing solo lane because I cannot. Like, I lose. I get so nervous. I get shaky. Right, like anxiety comes through when you're in that one-on-one. I can't solo lane, and now I can't carry anymore because they've essentially turned it into its own weird version of a solo lane. I'm a little better at hunters than I am warriors, but I have to support because otherwise, I feel, as weird as it is, I feel like I'll throw the game. Because I know I'm going to lose every single head-to-head. If they get aggressive into me, I'm out of there.
It does. You can feel a little bit of pressure on your shoulders in those 1v1s. You know it's all on you to succeed, but obviously Griff and Guy very comfortable with it here at this point. Guy was also alongside SOT, doing it at the SPL level, now dropping down to the SOC and dominating, I think, as we'd expect them to do. And even in this game, where SOT took a couple of bad spills in solo, avoidable ones, it's still okay. They're only down about 1,000 gold. It's certainly not backbreaking. In fact, he's not too far behind in experience to Layers either. They're both level 9. He has the SCS finished and should be able, I think, to compete in those matchups. Now, though, Wolves looking to invade in the jungle, bullying SOT a little bit, but got there too early. So now he starts to retreat, forced into the ultimate. Wolves, I don't know if he was overreacting a bit or if he's right to do that if he gets caught in the CC chain, but he makes it out of there safely thanks to the Somersault Cloud.
I think now that Stone Cutting Sword is online, it makes it a little easier for Solar Troll to win that matchup because this is the thing. The pin damage is good, right, to start off for SOT, and you're going to see it here. Not as much, though, as what you're going to see afterward. The knock-up into autos that just decimate whoever he's looking at.
It's a good ultimate there from Quig, and Wolves is able to escape as a result, but I think they're considering a dive here. There's 4 people in right, but thankfully they don't follow 3. They'll just take the blue buff invade instead, but there's the 9 turns blessing. That should pull Wolves back in, and Heed will get the kill credit for that one. What about Layers, though? He is on the wrong side of town, and Heed happy to dive to set it up, but SOT comes in too, and Layers just takes the kill they give him. Sloppy at best so far here in this one. Quig manages to live as well as Layers gets the double, but Spreen gets a double of his own, taking care of Layers in trade. Ooh. But Crimson finds the snipe point blank, and that makes it 3 for 3.
Now, this is maybe a little difficult to say, but I'll be honest, snipes like that I feel like are a little harder than the long-range snipes, right? Because like the window of error I think is easier to juke out. So for someone like Spreen, I think you're ultimately kind of back against the wall. Maybe makes it a little easier for Crimson to lock you down. But that still should have been a kill onto the ROM. I think Heed backs off just because the damage output Crimson has, plus the sustain that Crimson brings being a Raw. I think that's really good. This is not anywhere near the way I thought this game was going to be going, Finch. I mean, you know, 3-2 and 3 there for Layers. He's having a very solid game. He's been able to shut down SOT pretty consistently. So far, I think that's where all 3 of his kills have been. If not, maybe he found one on the side there. But either way, I think this is great for Mind the Gap as a start. The only downside I really see is that each time we've seen them pull ahead in experience, if we go back, you know, a minute, 2 minutes before that fight and you look back at the charts, they were only 400 ahead after being kind of vastly ahead. It seems like Spreed as a team are farming a little bit better, and you can even see it here, right? A huge spike when they get those kills, and then it drops to nothing but 200 experience in their lead. It's not a whole lot convincing me that they're doing I guess, the best job of keeping this lead and staying as far ahead as possible. It showcases where Spreed's talents really are.
They do still have, though, the 900 net worth lead in the jungle, and they still have Quig getting aggressive. Ultimate into the stun. And SOT never stood a chance with no purification beads. You pointed out that blink earlier, and he's paid for it a couple of times already. So that pick for Mind the Gap, though, is just that. It's a pick. It does not end up leading into anything else. No Furies on the backside of that, or even any buff invades, but certainly you'll take that time where SOT doesn't get to farm and Layers does. And Layers is already, as I pointed out, with that near 1,000 gold lead, which is exactly where he is, over the enemy jungler, over SOT. It's working, right? He's comfortably ahead.
Now, I'm just going back because I wanted to see for myself that this was true. Because I remember seeing it, but I had to double check. I'm going to throw some numbers at you. I want you to know it's a KDA. 25, 4, and 8. Now, this may surprise you, but this 7 days ago, that is exactly the slash line that SOT had, at least in game 1 of these two playing against each other. So, if you want to keep pace with that, he's used up his deaths for the game already in his first 12 minutes. I'm wondering where, that performance was. I mean, he single-handedly brought that together. Granted, Layers was able to keep up and cause a lot of trouble for them as well. So there was a lot of presence in return from Mind the Gap in the jungle, but you got to see SOT really pull far ahead. And, in the second game, he just did it again, right? He stayed as aggressive, maybe not as many kills. I think he ended at around 13. So, maybe not the biggest, but I still feel like he should have a better performance than what we're seeing so far.
Yeah, sometimes those games when you get really far ahead right at the beginning,
I
don't know if you can count all of it, right, as skill gap from that point on, right? The skill check was kind of at the beginning, but I don't know if that's going to be the case here, right? SOT's way behind, and his Layers leveraging it into the same kind of lead. Not quite the same as what SOT was doing, where he's running away with it freely without ever really having to pay his life in trade, but still, I think that might be kind of the comparison we're looking at. But now the experience starting to bear out the net worth, right? Level 13 for Layers as opposed to level 11 there for SOT. So clearly that gap in the jungle is starting to expand, and perhaps Mind the Gap need to mind that gap and try and find a way to use it, but they're going to start up an objective on the right side of the map? Yeah, I like dropping that one too. Curious, because that's where Spree has spent most of their time. No way that one's going down for free.
I mean, they were just able to get that Gold Fury over there as well, thanks to the snipe from Crimson, so you're already ahead. I think it's a good call to kind of say, let's tone down the risky plays, although this one's a big one. Wolves is getting in.
He has the ultimate, though, so the safety's there. SOT is underneath his tower with Layers showing some presence, so Wolves goes in, drops the cudgel, and is trying to delay the back coming out from Heed. Not a ton of kill potential there, but they're still getting aggressive. Oxform in and coming right back, all to deny the back, and now they will try and take this Pyromancer. This makes more sense. They've got more control. They have guaranteed that Heed is too low to be here. They think SOT is backed, and now this Pyromancer confirmed another one of these neutral objectives going over to Mind the Gap. They're playing this early game lead pretty well.
Yeah, at this point, it's going to take, I think, a big rotation or just a big series from Spree to make sure things go their way. Looking at this next item, theoretically, the chin size coming from the Erlong Shin, I guess he could technically go for something like an Aussie or an Executioner because they build over there, but it depends on who you're asking. I guess if you're Sino, then the Executioner is something that you can fit into a jungle's build, although he built it on, I believe, on Osiris was what he was playing it on, or using it with last week in the jungle, whereas chin size tends to be the normal pickup for an Erlong Shen. And again, when all of his power is in the auto attacks, especially with the aggression where SOT's been putting it, that's going to help burn through Wolves a little bit easier, Quig a little bit easier in terms of bleeding down their health bars. Because a lot of the combo is the turtle knockup into how many autos can I fit in right here. The attack speed's beneficial, and the damage is going to be beneficial. And that will make things a little more in his favor, I think, in these fights. But, you were mentioning net worth. You have to look at the net worth in the jungle specifically, not only the levels, but you've already got the Hydras online if you're Layers. You're already 2 tiers up on the next item that you are able to be ahead of SOT. So you're still fighting from a pretty large deficit in the jungle.
Mid lane 2 as a level 17 for Crimson as opposed to 15 on the other side. So this mid jungle has benefited from this strategy from Mind the Gap. Guy being a little stubborn here with this defense, but I suppose it works. I can't believe with 4 members here in Mind the Gap we're that nervous about it, but they are continuing to be aggressed on. Bluegan used his ultimate, responded to by the Stygian Torment from Twig just to control Bluegan. I don't know about this from Mind the Gap at all, and they end up paying for it. They trade support for support, but when you're ahead, when you're the aggressor, there's no reason you have to take an even trade, and now Layers is in a fight all alone as well. What is this from Mind the Gap? Sloppy to say the least.
I mean, it goes really well. I was actually going to get onto Blugan about pushing someone out of the crush because that has to be devastating for your Scylla. But as of right now, SOT, that chin size was all he needed. But that's the damage Raw can bring, baby. Crimson showing up.
Yeah, both teams only good on the defensive positioning, I guess, as Crimson finds a double stun into that Celestial Beam, proves to be the winning combo here for him. Now Guy, with these autos, no mana, can't find the kill either. So odd. No reason in my mind that this same type of fight couldn't have happened when they were pushing up. Instead, they walked up, ran, spent their CC on Quig, or on Blugan, and then in the end they were finally able to get the kill. Let Layers die in a 1v3. So odd is the only word I could think of to describe the way these fights are going. I'm not following it, Gore. Not at all.
Especially because, let's follow up. I guess pressure for the Fury, right? 30 seconds out, you get something over here on left, so now you maybe have an advantage towards Mind the Gap. But realistically, that was all for Tier 1 tower pressure? Like, that not necessarily
Right.
the most coveted thing in SMITE, right, to be fighting over. So an interesting one at that. I guess, like you said, an interesting hill to die on, both for Mind the Gap, I guess, getting aggressive or backing off as much as they did early on in that fight, when maybe they could have taken the numbers advantage when they had a 4v2. And then even more so for Spreed to jump under the Tier 1 and reverse the numbers advantage against them. I think it was, all in all, just a brawl fest is the best way to, I think, describe that one. We'll have to see if they can keep it up, because right now the Fury is probably the biggest point of contention, I guess is the better way to describe it. It's going to be easy for Crimson, ult up to snipe it and control it, and so Spreed have to decide whether or not they want to fight over a Primal or let this one go, do what we've seen some teams do, and maybe just wait for the Pyromancer to come up to try and equalize the trade.
You saw the Lotus Crown as that last item Crimson got. That's going to be a huge item for him here. Blugan blinking in, though, to deny Crimson the back. And he has 3 members waiting in the wings, so Crimson in a whole lot of trouble. I'm a monster. And they use the Rom ultimate as well to try and guarantee this kill. But Layers falls to Spreed with a heavy commitment in the jungle. They're just right. It takes 3 ultimates, but they get 2 kills. Now they've got control around this Fury. And all of a sudden, the momentum of this game could shift here. Gore, Mind the Gap, not expecting that aggression, and they paid for it.
Now you're in an unfortunate fight, right? They just took the Primal Fury. They've got Blugan and Heed already leading the way. You're pretty low, and SOT has already showcased reckless abandon. No care for his own life, is willing to go in for a fight. And now it might be biting him back. He's going to get some healing from that taunt, from that ult, I should say. But ultimately, this is an interesting fight, I think, for both teams. Just low enough on Spreed that you want to get aggressive if you're Mind the Gap, but the numbers advantage is always difficult to play against.
Yeah, Wolves has to ult here because he used the Tiger stun in the middle of the lane, so that's his ultimate now on cooldown. And maybe if there's no fight, that's not a big deal, right? But it just feels as though necessarily didn't have to happen. He thought maybe they were going to heavily commit going left. He could isolate Spring. They turned around. That did prevent them from chasing out. And so I suppose I can talk myself into liking it. But Quig getting aggressive. Guy J turning around. Does get the kill into Quig, but he's been stunned out by Wolves. And with too many members there, he will end up falling. That means now we've got 21 kills in as many minutes, a little less, as these two teams happy to take any kind of fight they can find.
I mean, it still floors me when I look down, because you've got this many kills, and normally you expect a couple of people. I guess 3-1-3 for 2 members there on Mind the Gap, and then 3-0-3 for Griff. Does feel pretty solid. It's just interesting to see that the kills are not only so well spread out, but you're not getting the best slash lines, I guess, that you could. 1 and 5 over there for SOT, and the rest only able to pick up 2 kills each. Like, it feels like Spreed are coming out of this maybe even, if at all, right, when they're winning the fights, versus what Mind the Gap are doing, which leaves them slightly ahead, but slightly, I think, is the only way to describe it. They haven't found themselves enough of a lead, even at 3,000, to really pull far ahead and take Spreed out of this game. So even 21 minutes in, even with a small lead, they need to do a little more to make sure they can solidify this as a win.
Wolves needs to make sure he's careful. Tiger stun lands. SOT now low, but ends up using his ultimate. SOT trades it out for the Somersault Cloud from Wolves in the other direction. Wolves still stepping on the gas, leaps forward. He takes a little bit of damage, but it's Layers who's isolated in the pit. He makes it out, and Quig jumps back in. Stun lands, but now he's been hit by the root, hit by the Emma Monster, and Spreen gets the reset. Misses the second one, and Layers narrowly escapes getting caught out. As inside that Rage transformation, he remains close, able to find that War Cry. But underneath the Tier 1 tower, Mind the Gap, just barely make it out. Now Crimson is stuck between 4. He's still in the Rage transformation, still has the root, and Crimson is barely surviving with all these slows, with the heals. But with all of Spreen coming back, they're able to find the kills. That's 2 for 0 in favor of the Chaos side team, who was behind coming into that fight.
And 1 minute without Crimson means 1 minute without snipes, 1 minute without healing, 1 minute that you just don't have to worry about what has been an insane amount of damage in my mind from this Ra. Granted, it's only 300 above what Scylla has brought. It just feels like it's been more impactful for all of that damage. Maybe that's all that's really coming through for it. And so without him for another 30 seconds still, I think you're able to still feel confident getting aggressive, although right now it's Mind the Gap that are trying to take down Spreen.
That's a lot of damage Spreen just took from Grip, if you're wondering if he's here, but he is no longer. Blugan gets rid of him, so it's 1 for 1 mid for ADC, but Heed wants to make it 2 for 1, gets rid of Layers as well. Crimson fell earlier, Layers and Griff joined him. That means there's 4 members alive here for Spree to focus on the FG, and only Wolves and Quig, the front line, to consider some kind of steal. So this won't be done with damage, it will be done through disruption if Mind the Gap are able to find it. Quig comes to the backline with the Stygian Torment, collects 3 members, and almost gets the reset, but Blugan keeps the aggro. Fire is low, well controlled is Quig. Wolves does get Gaijay, but FG will go to the 3 remaining members as Spree control it. And now Wolves, low on mana, low on health, is not the target. Spree will instead take this Pyro.
And they're happy with that, right? I mean, maybe not as happy as you would be if Spreen or Gaijay were able to get that Fire Giant buff.
Yeah, especially if
but you
Guy
get it onto
lives,
someone who's still going to be, aggressive. I think SOT having it's going to be good. Frontlines having it means that they have that sustain up front, so they can maybe get aggressive under these towers. Pyromancer's just some flavor, and they take the gold lead, right? That's the other big portion of that, which is stripping away a lot of the power that has been in favor of Mind the Gap and putting it back over onto your side. At this point, I'm looking at the fact that between SOT and Gaijay, Wolves and Quig are not going to have a good time. Their health bars are going to disappear rather fast, and now there's 2 Toxic Blades on there as well that are picked up for the side of Spree, just to make sure that Crimson's healing isn't going to be as effective in the middle of it. That, plus a Divine Ruin, plus a Pestilence, all going to be able to come through and at least chunk it, and Ra isn't necessarily known for burst healing, so I think overall this is actually going to be enough to really control that. They actually have 2 Pestilences now that I'm looking at it to be able to control it, which might be a little bit of overkill, but either way, gets the job done.
Yeah, I don't find that quite as damning as some others, as Solar or Troll takes the damage early, but Quig is the one that gets smacked by I'm a Monster. The last bit of damage comes from Guy's snipes. Into the backline goes Heed with those thorns ticking. Good luck hitting me. Heed gets rid of Crimson. That's a 2 for 0 already in favor of Spreen, and Guy wants more. More Wolves is the one who falls, and suddenly Mind the Gap are running for their lives. And to me, Gore, this collapse from Mind the Gap with that early control that they had, it comes out of this last FG fight. I can't break it down because Griff's still in trouble. Heed zoning them all the way back to Phoenix.
I mean, it just feels like over-aggression from Mind the Gap. Maybe it falls apart there as they get over there. But with Fire Giant, now this should be pretty easy. You can see, though, why it's important to have it on some of your carries. Gaijay, he's able to deal a lot of damage, but without that Fire Giant buff, these Phoenixes are going to take a little bit of time to really get through.
Wow, man, this is already so much lost here from Mind the Gap. Quig, though, Stygian Torment does control 3 into the stun. That's big, but there just wasn't that much follow-up. Quig largely all alone here. Stalls does cost them some HP, but they lose left side Phoenix anyway. Quig drops right after that. Griff dies the second he comes out. He has nothing to do, so Layers and Crimson, full HP with the Wolves there to join them, should be able to defend, and that is enough to deter Spree. I mean, look at the map, right? Every other tower, every other lane is up.
Yeah.
They got to deal with that first, but Spree comfortably in control here.
I got really excited for a second. I was like, wait, they could try to end this. I mean, go for a couple more kills, and then I looked up and I'm like, there's 4 towers. That Titan will not even blink at them. It does not care about the damage they do right now. So they need more pressure. It's interesting dynamic being able to get a Phoenix before 2 tier 1s have fallen. That are still left in the map is, I think, impressive, maybe a little confusing overall. It showcases where Mind the Gap have had a vast majority of control. I mean, this really has cropped up for Spree since Fire Giant. Nothing before that was really screaming them being in control of the game or dictating the pace of it. that Fire Giant changed everything for them, and now they're able to get aggressive. They've knocked down a lot of towers. Gold lead is advancing almost to 10k in their favor. They are definitely controlling the pace of this game now and making it difficult for Mind the Gap to find their entrance. I mean, if Layers goes in, he's so far been easy to disrupt and take down. You saw Griff, unfortunately, he has 2 deaths, and I'm pretty sure they were back-to-back. He respawned into a second one. So it just hasn't been easy for Mind the Gap to get in there and really make a defense.
Now this right side tier 2 under siege. Looks like Mind the Gap wanted to defend it, but Quake pays the price for that decision. Meanwhile, the rest of Spreed are in the backline creating space for this tier to go down when someone elects to hit it. I assume Guy J will step in and do that, and he has. That's the tier 2 falling. Wolves escapes inside that Ox form, but Blugan continuing to push forward a little bit too far ahead of his backline carries, who don't seem to agree with this aggression, at least not yet. They want to sustain a bit before they push in. But this difference for me has been solo diff, man. Heed has been tremendously impactful in these fights, and let's see if he continues that trend. 3-man knock-up, and just like that, Spreed have the right side Phoenix as well. But Layers will see if he can find some punish on the back of it, looking for Spreen inside the ultimate, and will collect the kill, but SOT right behind him makes it 1-for-1.
Yeah, it's that question of whether or not it's worthwhile. You lose the Phoenix, you get a kill, but you lose your life in the process. All around a Fire Giant respawning in 10 seconds with no Layers. Maybe it balances out. Crimson being alive, Snipe should be available by the time Fire Giant's in a position that somebody could actually kill it. It means that you still have some way to contest this if you are Mind the Gap. At least steal it away if you're not going to have that pressure. Send Ra over to the right lane to clear up the minion wave so he's within a comfortable distance. And you take away the I'm a Monster secure, even though it's not available there for Spreen. It makes it a little nicer to know that no crush, no big burst damage from a mage is going to make this go easily. And so Spreed still have to put some work in to try and confirm this, but I think all of that comes in with the weight of Mind the Gap forcing them to be uncomfortable. And right now, Mind the Gap are doing nothing of the sort. They're too worried about the fire minions in left. They got a pretty good push up on that side, but they're nowhere near in position for this FG.
And I think this is the right call. I mean, I know it's the 4v4, but they're just so far behind. It's 10k gold. It's so risky to defend, and as you covered already, they got to push that left side wave up. They did a tremendous job with that. So that is very, very far out. They'll have some time where they don't have to worry about it, and now they're here to defend right, but getting there a little bit too late for that. Spreed still have that wave pushed up. I mean, I mentioned that there's been some, some solo diff in this one, but it's just team fight diff as well. Spreed have had the damage, it's felt like to me, Gore, to take a single target out of the fights quickly and Mind the Gap have been a little bit too spread out with their damage.
Yeah, it's been difficult to figure out where they want to put their pressure. I mean, at once was 1 and 5, now it's 2 and 5 there. Solar Troll was a pretty easy target early on, but now, let's say you kill Solar Troll, cool, Spreen and Gaijay just eviscerate you. You kill Spreen, cool, SOT and Gaijay just eviscerate you. It just feels difficult to choose a target, and unfortunately, it does feel like, Griff, Crimson, and Layers all have a different target in mind at the very beginning, and you can feel that non-cohesion coming into effect for them because it's so difficult to just burn one target. Now, they all are able to focus on Heat, but the left Phoenix is gone because of it.
Yeah, I can't believe this is the split. They went with 2-man taunt coming through from SOT, forces the relics out, and just barely up to the sky is Wolf, so he shall survive. Leaping in is Quig, or Blugan rather, he makes his way back safely, but boy was it close. Wolf, though, does not get the same honor. He lands from that ultimate and lands into the afterlife, so now Spreed making their way into this middle Phoenix. Still Fire Minions coming in right. Still had to worry about SOT in left. And still have to find a way to defend this middle Phoenix down a man. So they make the decision to go and target Spreen. That works. He was all alone there in this disjointed fight, but they pay for it mightily. Griff ends up falling, but as he's done all game, Crimson finds some big cleanup kills with that Celestial Beam, and still the mid Phoenix stands.
Crimson is the entire reason this team is still in at this point in my mind. He's been finding consistent snipes. Spreen's so easy to kill there because, that's right, Crimson hit him with a snipe just before that. They are able to find these kills, that's right, because Crimson's damage is confirming it. Even now, he's just setting them up to the point where Spreed are too uncomfortable to get aggressive. They don't have the health bar, they don't have the sustain, even with a Fire Giant buff, to really stay as aggressive as they want. They're playing the numbers game. Blugan, I mean, this is pretty dangerous to go in for.
Good knock up onto layers, and he has no way to get out once that lands. Quake too low has already learned from Guy J that the damage a little bit too strong, so he falls out. But Wolves is back into the fight. That's how long this has gone. He got to fall and respawn into the somersault cloud instantly as well, and dunks down for a good amount of damage. That does get the kill onto Guy. Blugan low as well, but look at the base. Fire minions are shredding the right side Phoenix. The Titan is already low, and chasing kills might not be it right now. Fellas, your base is under siege. Perhaps Crimson can handle this on his own, though.
I don't know.
As Griff, I think, eventually realized that chase wasn't going to work, and the Titan barely survives.
I'll be honest, I'd sweating a little bit if I'm Crimson there. Like, if you were any other, I want to say just any other mage, any other build, like one less power item online, you don't make that save. Your Titan's dead because your team decided to chase and get aggressive. And, I mean, I guess ultimately they are going to find themselves ahead just because they didn't lose there, but I see 3 tier 2s, 3 Phoenixes still standing on the side of Spreed, 1 Phoenix on some very shaky legs over there in right lane for Mind the Gap. And with 4 people, almost 5 people now alive, even without Fire Giant online, because it's going to take longer than 20 seconds, I think, to regroup and get to the other side of the map, at this point, you could just backdoor that Titan. I mean, I just run in, like, try to sneak through if you can. We can see that there's no ward there on left to really catch them, and if Spreed just ran that direction, they'd be able to walk it down right into the Titan room and kill it.
Yeah, I don't even know how much more they would need besides I'm a Monster to finish the Titan off from here, right? Maybe a couple of autos alongside, and that Titan is done. I think Spreed recognized that they're trying to get aggressive. That's the Celestial Beam that's been hurting them all. What?
Jeez.
Crimson, what? He's just soloing SOT in the middle of the lane. He got a little bit of help from Layers. I can't call it a solo, but that's what Crimson's been doing all game, just hitting his shots, man, and hurting folks.
And I think I can now reiterate that's the reason they're still in this. Like, I think Layers is having some interesting and able to get some kills. Wolves is able to help a lot to thwart a defense. Griff does a lot to help thwart defenses, but realistically, Crimson is the one that is making some of the most ridiculous plays to keep them moving forward right now. And so Mind the Gap, keep that aggression in their side. I can't believe, I mean, this game felt done 9 minutes ago, and already they're putting themselves maybe not in a position to retaliate, but their left Phoenix is about to respawn. They've only got a couple more waves of fire minions to deal with. Mid is doing pretty well as well. As long as they can get these Phoenixes up, that Titan can start healing. Then maybe they can look somewhere else. No presence around a Fire Giant again, though, Finch. Makes me a little less hopeful.
Well, there's no price tag on that error, so we don't know how costly it is yet for SOT, but I think we'll soon learn if they end up paying or not. They can get this Fire Giant on SOT as well, so I suppose really they don't lose much at all, right? I mean, they were going to wait for Fire Giant. They were going to get it on all 5 members. They still did in the end anyway, and SOT is even going to grab the red buff on his way down so he can do even more damage, though he's at the bottom of the player damage chart, so I don't know why they're giving it to him, but still, SOT is the one that has it. We'll see how well they choose to push. Right now, it looks like a 3-2 split with SOT coming to join Heed in mid and Quay getting aggressive in right, but Blugan has his ultimate. They trade them out 1-for-1. The snipe from Crimson this time finds nothing, and Quake's life is forfeit. Too aggressive all on his own. Now SOT in the 2v1 avoids the Tiger stun into the knockup and nearly has enough to find the trade, but Layers' damage is too strong. But even if SOT dies here, he's done the job. Everyone else makes it in. Spreed gets the kill onto the Titan, and that is game number 1 going in favor of the Chaos Squad.
I love the concept of Heat. Like, you have this big fight, right? Everything's got to be grandiose. Titan fights, especially right there, are normally the biggest portion of it. I mean, you could get a defense theoretically there from Mind the Gap if they find some good kills. Layers gets that back off. If your Titan's at full health and maybe you have, let's say, a tier 2 tower online, so it's a little tankier, that Titan is a blink away from dead for 3 minutes in a row, right? And so it's not too surprising to see them just go, you know what? What if we just, bold strategy, but what if we just run into there and see if we can kill it? Everybody else is distracted with the fight. I think Heed gets it done the right way by just making it to the back line and, well, killing the Titan.
But it's such a ludicrous way for this game to go, right? They start off trying to focus down the solo lane early on and try to get Wolves ahead, right, on Mind the Gap, and they do manage to get the jungle mid ahead, but that doesn't end up mattering much at all. Able to fight back in worthy opposition here on this one, and that is already game 1 down. Now, we'll end up taking a really quick break. We'll come back for the rest of this set to see who can make it through to that Perkit playoffs, so don't go anywhere. We'll tell you what happens after this. Hey, well, actually, welcome back to the SMITE Open Circuit. It's Finch and Myth here this time. Gore had to go deal with some other responsibilities. I always knew he was Superman underneath those clothes, so that's where he's off. And I've got Mifflin here with me instead. Miff, we're in the middle of a really good set here between Spreen and Mind the Gap, one that I think you're very familiar with here at this point, so no surprise to you that Spreen won this first game, but it was not through the SOT carry. He kind of went into mode, I'd say, in game one, but they managed to win anyway.
Yeah, what was his slash line at 1.1 and 5 to start off the game? SOT was a non-factor for the beginning of that match. I think that entire game was really off the back of Heed finding pressure out of the Soul lane and Guy J just kind of holding his own against his lane opponent Griff and then eventually rotating in and putting out the pressure. Overall, though, that gives me more confidence for Spreed as a team. It's no longer that SOT carry project. These guys have diverse, interesting ways that they can win games.
They haven't had to do it yet, but this time they needed to step up when SOT got a little bit too aggressive in the jungle early on. He died twice around a blue buff invade, neither which was particularly well advised from what I could see, and then started to struggle a bit more after that. But I think this is one you already covered how well that he'd played, but I think the Scylla damage from Spreen was critical. Wow, you all knew what I was going to talk about. It was huge in this time too. We went right to it right away, and had plenty of setup coming his way because Blugan played a great game. I do actually think Quig played really well too at times. He was helping to set up for the squad, but the more and more the game got derailed, the more that Quig was the one that ended up struggling. Yeah, exactly like that. On the receiving end, oftentimes, way too much damage.
I did see some pretty hot plays from Mind the Gap, though. Quig, as you highlighted, hit a 3 or 4-man ultimate on that left side Phoenix defense, which I thought was almost enough to turn around the fight until I looked at the gold lines and realized they were still about 10,000 down. So it was a kind of an effort in futility, if you would. But these teams both have a lot of talent on them. They both have the capacity to win these games. We could very easily go 3 here, even though Spreed in recent weeks has looked very dominant.
I mean, listen, Mind the Gap is essentially the old Astral Authority team at this point, right, from console. They have everyone except Inbound, who's up making a name for himself in the SPL. They also did have Barwalik there at one point. I think Crimson played with them, too. So it's essentially the console boys here now, right? Wolves, Layers, Crimson, as well as Griff, their old ADC. So we'll see if they can make it work, if they can find that synergy to beat Spreed. But Spree just has too much talent, right? Guy J and SOT are both SPL caliber players. They were there earlier this year, and both, I think, especially in Guy's case, maybe a little unceremoniously were sent down. But I think they're proven here that they deserve consideration, as they both played very well.
It almost feels like they're screaming up to the SPL level, hey, we're going to work our way back up anyway. Maybe we just take out one of your spots through relegations or something along those lines. I think that there's really nothing to worry about with this Freed squad. And it seems like they've got a pretty good handle on how they want to ban out these games as well. You have Moja and Persephone immediately getting targeted out. Hercules remove that just absolute boulder of attack. You see what I did there? But it does leave up Sun Wukong. Mind the gap, pick it up.
Yeah, I saw it, Myth. Thanks, dude. He warned me coming in, and I guess now I'm getting a first-hand look at what it's going to be like. Wukong is the first pick, Kuzenbo on the other side, and for the most part here, Myth, this is basically just the same way that we saw this go last time. I think they second-picked Kuzenbo, did Spreed, but I don't know what functional difference that'll make if they also take the ROM here. Yeah, this is so far the exact same run back from what we saw in the very first game. So I really think that the pressure is kind of on Mind the Gap to make some kind of adjustment here, because Spreed made it work in Game 1, even with SOT struggling throughout the beginning of this game.
And I don't think you can rely on SOT continuing to struggle in the early game, especially if he does decide to go back towards that Erlang Shen. But Mind the Gap, pretty comfortable. Again, picking up the Ra here, Sun Wukong flanking it as well. I want to see them at least try and take away something, but the Cerberus pick, maybe they're comfortable with their draft. It could certainly work out, but I think they had a very strong start in the early game in Game 1, and it wasn't enough to propel them into a win. I want to see some more adjustments, as you alluded to.
Yeah, their mid-jungle were both about 2 levels ahead in Game 1, and still were not able to convert that into any kind of meaningful late-game presence, right? They had that left side push where they kind of backed off it, they lost a member, but then they fought back and won. It all kind of fell apart around that FG dance and some of those fights in that solo lane as well, right next to the Fire Giant, and losing those. So maybe they think it's just execution. If a couple of those fights go differently, they win that one. We'll see what the adjustments are. So far, even if the pick order's not the same, the picks are the same, right? It's Scylla, Rom, and Kuzenbo again for Spreed, and it's Cerberus, Ra, and Sun Wukong again for Mind the Gap. But some adjustments will have to be made. There will not be a Cullen to be able to take for Heed over in the solo lane, and wouldn't be surprised this is an Erlang ban, but no, they're going to continually focus out Heed. I guess he just doesn't want to play Ama if they think these are the two bans to do instead.
Yeah, he must be incapable. That's the only explanation I have. He must literally just not have that gut unlocked. He just doesn't have the favor to afford it, no gems either. Because if Amaterasu is still available and you're banning out Cucullin, I can only classify that as a gross misplay, a disgusting dumpster misplay. But it seems like it should be able to work out, because Kali gets picked up here. No, it shouldn't. Amaterasu should definitely get picked up. And not only is it just one of the strongest picks in the solo lane, but it also has some very good counter matchups into Mind the Gap's draft, even into this Erlang Shen that they pick up for themselves to immediately target out Solo or Troll on the other side. Amaterasu doesn't care. CC immunity on the ultimate, a silence to deal with the transformation. I would be surprised if we don't see it.
Well, it's being hovered here, if nothing else. Production's listening to us. Who knows, though, if Spreed are at this point. The On Her are coming through, though, and I think this is something you've been playing a good amount of, and yeah, I mean, I didn't get my hopes up on that one. On Her, I know you've been playing a good amount of this pick here lately, enjoying the new leap that he's got and able to get to where he's going a little bit faster. Is that enough to where you think On Her should be getting picked up here in a world where Rom and Cupid are banned? Is that where you go next?
I've got a pretty distinct ideology as far as hunters go, where it's On Her Cupid at that top tier. Right below it, we got the Jingwei and the Heimdall. And then right below that, just ever so slightly, is the On Hers of the world, the Ulers, the gods like that. And I think that he is slightly slept on right now. Disperse getting that pre-fire buff, making it much easier for him to get that jump off without getting interrupted, as well as having CC immunity ultimate, nice CC inside of the team fight, and displacement through the shifting sands. He's got a lot of tools that can help out his team. It's just a worry of consistency. He's not nearly as safe as those other top tier picks. So in a meta where we're seeing cringe ganks happen every other game, and if you get that cringe gank off, you can rotate back through at level 6 and do it again, and then at a level 7 and again. On Her might struggle in that world.
Well, let's move into game number 2. The Cthulhu was the solo lane pick. And listen, I won't. As good as Alma is, I'm not going to complain very much if Cthulhu is your solo lane pick instead, especially because his team fight presence is probably even better than Alma's, despite how strong the auras are that she provides and how good Dazzling Offensive is. There's no one better than Cthulhu in terms of just disruption and creating a massive body and making it difficult for the other team to push forward. They must retreat. So if Spreed can leverage that well, then I got no problems whatsoever with this Cthulhu pick.
And it does fit their draft incredibly well. If you just have someone who's kind of creating chaos in the middle of a team fight, forcing Mind the Gap to either D-group or retreat or just controlling the space at all, you've got gods like Rom, who's going to be an absolute chainsaw in the late game, or SOT on this Kali with even the slightest opening should be able to work his way through and find those sick Kali lines with the ultimate to reset as well. So I think that just having that CC center is enough in of itself. But they don't have as much confirmable CC, as easily confirmable CC as they would have with Amaterasu if they were worried about setting up for Spreen in mid. Cthulhu has some knockups, but that's a much tighter timing than a stun would be for the Ama Monster ultimate. Bluegin's engagement being a little bit one note off that dash is going to be a little bit harder to set up for Spreen as well. I think we're going to see this Scylla kind of have to operate on her own once the teamfight phase starts up.
Yeah, a bit odd. I mean, listen, I want to make sure I preface this by saying hunters are hunters, and even on her, without the attack speed stem, is certainly going to hurt a Cthulhu, but not quite the same, right, as some of these other hunters with those big attack speed stems who chew through him well, who can convert that extra attack speed into power with Silver Branch or something of the like. Now, so I preface this, on her is still going to be a problem for Cthulhu in the late game, even if he's inside that pillar, right, and taking the additional damage, but maybe not quite the same as what Rom can do, as this is trouble now for Bluegin. Good Impale comes through, and Griff just saying hello.
They don't have the attack speed hunter, but they've also got the added benefit of having an auto attack jungler. This Erlang Shen also is going to have a very strong matchup in a Cthulhu as well. If he elects to pick up the kin size, he might as well just be another hunter, matched it up with the SCS, and he's going to be absolutely shredding. But again, I've got to be so worried about how they're going to play around this Kali, mind the gap that is, once they've got Spree just running them down as a holistic unit, with a Kali just kind of playing this solo agent role on the side. It feels like Mind the Gap are really going to be relying on starting off the fights on their own and finding a one-shot kill.
Players looking for an early game gank. Knockup comes through, and Griff will be the one getting the credit for the kill at the tail end. But that is all set up by Layers. What was that myth you said about cringe ganking and maybe on her can work around that? Well, it's happening here. Mind the Gap, 2 minutes, saying hello to the duo lane.
Yeah, it's just whichever jungler is cringier on the day is going to win that on her matchup. It seems like Layers showing up before the 2-minute mark even ticks over and does find his teammates a couple of kills. And I think it's a little bit reliant on the fact that this Kali is going to take a little bit longer to come online as well. She needs to get the boots and the kin size and likely the hasten katana before she's really willing to commit herself to ganks, whereas Layers playing this early game pressure god instead of Erlang Shen has afforded the opportunity to kind of go wherever he wants on the map. All Solo or Troll needs to do at this point is to either pull ahead and farm because he's ganking less, or at least stay even if Layers gets a lead off kills.
See if he does. Quig is lurking outside the blue buff. Lurking is all he's doing. No opportunity for blue buff steal there. Once again, Layers now showing some presence at another side lane, but it's Solo where he's helping out by making sure they get that totem of coup. But Bluekin behind Griff. Not going to catch Griff off guard. My man's played a little bit too much Smite for that one to work. Good leap gets him out of there. But with Bluekin being over here, it's going to be really hard for Griff to step up and try and get this wave without putting himself in some danger. And I think Guy making good use of that.
But luckily, his wave is a little bit more stacked up Guy J's, that is, so it's going to just work its way naturally over to Griff, who can just farm up. But it seems like that is the strategy for Spreed. We want to keep pressure on the duo lane, force this Cerberus to stick around. Don't let Quig have free rotations in a mid, because Quig's going to have the most reliable setup for his Ra in mid, just the stun from a range, or even the ultimate to set up for the Searing Pain. So I like this ideology from Spreed to try and control the map ever so slightly, which is at the same note going to control the aggression that Mind the Gap can bring in the early game. But it's a double-edged sword. With so much pressure being put on the duo by Spreed, it's only going to incentivize Layers to continually gank out the duo lane instead of electing to go for the 3v3 in mid, or even fight inside the solo lane. And when you're fighting into an on-her in the early game with an Erlang Shen flanking him, it's not feeling good for whoever's on the receiving end.
Layers getting a bit aggressive. 9 turns blessing, locks down Spreed, even gets the knock up, but just not enough damage at this point for Layers to completely solo out Spreed, though he was close to being able to find that kill. Now, I'm not going to put really any stock in how this early game goes. If I learned that last game and Mind the Gap, getting a huge lead of the mid jungle and it just absolutely not mattering later on. So truly, it's just a show. Just going to enjoy some Smite mechanics until we find out at the 20-minute mark what really matters, is how I feel right now.
Goodness gracious. That first game did some mental damage to my boy. And you know what? I feel you on that, because just inside of that one micro play where Layers nearly solos out Spreen, which shouldn't have happened because Spreen could have just used Sentinel to escape at any point. Crimson was asleep at the wheel. He had Searing Pain. He had multiple CC setups and never even went for the shot. A little bit questionable as they worked their way into the blue.
Well, Wolves trying to defend the blue. Not going to be able to do it with this much control here from Spreed. Cthulhu being an unknowable horror as he escapes. Quig, on the other hand, leaping forward. Good staging and Torment, but SOT gets away from it with an ultimate of his own. Now Heed has to reposition, but Mind the Gap have shown up in numbers. Quig, the only one coming outside, but Wolves provide some support. Just barely not enough damage, but gets there in the end with a little bit of extra. That's enough for Heed to drop down, and Mind the Gap now with a 2-0 lead to start this game off.
Yeah, Wolves' Sun Wukong clone picks up the kill on the Heed. That's not a great way to go down. Any form of hard CC would have just eviscerated it from existence. Unfortunately, no one was willing to put that out for him, and Heed's going to lose his life for it. Wu 2 is what I'm going to call it from now on, just because I think that sounds pretty good. But going forward, we're looking at a 2-0 in favor of Mind the Gap. That includes First Blood. And we still haven't seen any real gold disparity. It's actually been closing up slowly. It's only about 600-ish gold separating these two teams. That's nothing at the 6-minute mark. I think you were right to discredit this early game just ever so slightly.
And remember, when they had something, it was still a struggle. So I'm certainly not going to overreact to them having nothing, which is what they have here right now. So Mind the Gap. Gonna need to chain this together a little bit more. This is the foundation, the beginnings, the blueprints, so to speak, for what a lead could eventually look like if they can assemble it later on. But that remains the question, right? Can they assemble it? And Myth, I don't think we've talked about it much, but this late game from Spreed is pretty strong, right? Ram, Scylla, Kali, Cthulhu, all ones that are difficult to try and contend with. Kuzenbo as well has some decent damage output insofar as it's your damage output, so it's not the easiest thing to deal with Spreed's draft late.
It isn't, so you want Mind the Gap to be doing well in the early game, and it seems like they're trying their best to do exactly that. Layers getting involved again.
Well, I understand my man does not have an ult, but still gonna be a difficult target to take down. But a big stun from Quig coming in topside has caught Heed off guard. A 3-man rotation to right, and Quig notches the 3rd kill of the game in the for Mind the Gap, and they want a bit more. They end up taking care of Blue, and Layers gets that one. So now 4 kills, dominant solo side pressure. An excellent start to this game here for Mind the Gap. There's no way to talk negatively about it, but I want to see him hold on to it.
Yeah, we need to see them do something with this lead as well. Normally, we see this pressure get tossed over in the long lane in the early game because it opens you up towards early gold furies. Now, with this solo lane pressure, sure, at around the 10-minute mark, they can start to look towards that Pyromancer, but already Heed moving back in, 1 versus 4.
I mean, you could say moving back in, but there's 4 of them here, Myth. What can my man do? Leave me alone! This is supposed to be solo lane. He uses the ultimate as soon as it comes back up, and Mind the Gap sniggering to themselves, I suppose. Hey, we got the blue running away. They're in a comfortable spot here now, man. The buff invades are coming through. The pressure coming through. They gotta keep showing it here to us, but this is exactly what it looks like at the start when you're building your leads.
Yeah, and Heed using his ultimate the second it comes back up, off the tail end of just using a teleport as well. I mean, with the pressure that Mind the Gap has been putting over there, I'm thinking to myself, if I'm Layers, all right, I'm going to back up, spend my gold, I'll be right back, Wolves. Just give me 2 seconds. We're going to kill this guy, all right? And then we're going to work our way to Pyromancer once that respawns as well. And it seems like Spreed are fine with it. They understand that they don't have to worry about the early game too much. Solo or Troll has been doing 0 damage throughout the entirety of the game, hasn't even looked for a gank, but is able to maintain the same level as Layers in the jungle. We're seeing that despite all this pressure going the way of Heed, he's only about a level down on his opposition as well. There's not much that Mind the Gap has been able to do to differentiate themselves or even separate themselves from the pack so far. but they're priming themselves for a very good position to look towards one of these neutral objectives in the very near future. I'm thinking Pyromancer because of their propensity to just camp out that solo lane, but I think that they also have a very strong draft towards looking towards Gold Fury. Desert Fury is going to be fantastic for burning it down. Searing Pain might be one of the better confirmed tools in the game right now if Spreen isn't able to close the gap enough to find the I'm a Monster, and he shouldn't be with a very strong front line that Mind the Gap has fielded.
Let's see if they can continue to leverage it. You can tell in the network chart, there's not a ton of really big gaps, maybe about 400 in the mid, around that same mark over in solo between these members, so it's not as if it's something that Spreed cannot bounce back from, but here's that solo lane pressure again, and SOT is the early victim. Quig able to lock him down and grabs Blugan as well, brings it right back into the Celestial Beam. Searing Pain can't connect, so Blugan gets some hair singed, but he will survive. Now Heed into the ultimate, looking to return the favor here a bit, but my man insta-cancels it. All right, I got a little too ambitious. I'm willing to admit it, says Heed. But now he's walking back towards the tower, and Mind the Gapper's going to look for the dive. He doesn't even have the ult. This is so odd of a decision here from my man Heed. He does have the dash, but I'm thinking this is a world where you got to hide under the tier 2, bud.
My dude Heed watched four people slam his blue buff and then W keyed away after showing them that he cancels his own ultimate.
That ain't me!
Yeah, that blue buff, that ain't me. You gotta bring those hands here, run them, and they absolutely do. And it's exactly it. They get the pressure in the solo lane. They pick up the Pyromancer. Spreed just is losing out off a solo diff, essentially. SOT makes the egregious mistake of deciding to go over to the solo lane. Has he not heard from his teammates how many enemies are going to be hovering in that side of the jungle? Doesn't even get the Kali Destruction ultimate off inside of that team fight. And Mind the Gap are doing exactly that. They're minding the gap. 3,000 gold now separating these two teams.
Yeah, just tough over there in solo, huh? He did a great game in game 1. They banned the Cucullin, the King Arthur, and they don't like this man. It seems clear to me, right, with the way that this game is going. They took all his picks away. He's 0-3. They said they're laughing at that man Stone Agaya. Good luck trying to have an impact here in this game, because Mind the Gap have come out of the gates hot this time, but they don't have a ton of leads elsewhere. Wolves going to really leverage this lead for it to matter.
Okay.
As Blukin gets control, Desert Fury connects with most of the spears, but not enough. Blukin lives through it easily with just those tank boots, and now Mind the Gap are the ones starting up another objective. They're moving over to this Gold Fury, daring Guy J to come in and steal. He cannot, and Mind the Gap get yet another neutral objective.
And SOT, a little bit deep, trades out 50% of his health bar to land 2 auto attacks onto a solo laner. Not the best trade for him, but we got to see a little bit of that damage output. He's already picked up the kin size, so he is putting out pretty sizable damage when he does decide to make contact with somebody, which has not been very often this game. Again, Akali just kind of waiting for her time in the late game. But Mind the Gap there, do a very interesting play to try and force out Blugan, and it works, and then immediately fall back to the Gold Fury. But it was risky. They almost didn't confirm it. The Searing Pain ultimate was about 2 seconds late. The Gold Fury had already been dead. So had Spreed been able to walk in, they might have been able to steal it.
That does not materialize, though, and now we're looking at a pretty close to 3,000 gold lead here from Mind the Gap. They're in a good spot at this point here in the game, as they have been all game long. The experience lead still not anything, though, that's damning if you're a Spreed fan, only 1,700, but the solo lane pressure continues. Wolves and Quig both over here taking care of this tier 1 tower. Heed has never in his life been this less impactful of a Cthulhu. This is the worst it's been, I promise, for him, and hopefully they'll get a chance for him to recover. He still has a late game colleague in his back pocket, a late game Scylla, that hopefully can eventually come to fruition and bail him out.
And a Rom with a lead, surprisingly, as well, so he doesn't have to worry too much about Guy J transitioning into the late game. But I'm glad that he just learns his lesson. Last time he was in that exact same predicament, he just walked into the enemies, so already we're seeing that maybe some respect has been imprinted onto this Cthulhu, and he's going to play a little bit safer going into the mid-game. But as of right now, being level 11 up against a level 12 on Wolves is not the biggest deal, maybe about a level and a half separating these two solo laners. And with the pressure that we've seen over there, it should be more.
I would think so too, and they tried to come over to solo and give Heed a lead last game. SOT did, but it didn't quite work. He was the one that got stuffed. Wolves ended up getting a lead as a result, and that lead didn't much matter. And now here in Game 2, Mind the Gap are intentionally giving Wolves a lead, and we'll get to see if his second time around with a lead, he can leverage it more. It's twice he's played the Sun Wukong, and last game, I know you're a big Wukong stan, but he wasn't getting the most value out of it. He's going to show us more this time.
Look, I'm not going to ever say that you didn't get value out of Sun Wukong because Sun Wukong didn't have it. I mean, that's got to be a feeling on the player, right? This god is ridiculous. A stun, a knock-up, CC immunity in the ultimate, an inbuilt heal, a slow for your team. You could turn into a bird, Finch. This man's got literally everything that you need to survive and dive. It's such a strong pick, especially with recent itemization changes, Soul Eater getting reworked, Heartseeker getting a slight buff as well, coming into a nerf very soon in the next patch. There is so much that makes Sun Wukong so effective in the late game that he can elect to not build as much defense as some of these other Soul Laners and still have the exact same level of survivability with more damage in their build, which means that they can straight up just solo mages in the late game. I think Sun Wukong is a slept-on pick, and he's still picked up maybe 80% of the time.
He's certainly strong. Wolves built last game, though, similarly to this. He built the Mantle and he built the Spirit Robe. And I know traditionally you want your Wukong to leverage a little bit more power. I feel like you like those hybrid items that get you some defense, some power. And he was just a little bit lacking in that regard. I don't think that build hurt him necessarily. He was plenty tanky and the team had damage. But he wasn't quite able to do what Wukong normally can if he's a little bit more... I feel like with Wukong, you kind of want to build maybe one dedicated defense item purely, and the rest needs to be hybrid.
Yeah, I'm going, if I'm Wolves in this situation, I'm going the Sledge next, I'm picking up a Heartseeker, and if I'm really feeling myself, I might finish this up with a Crusher. Like, he's got so much survivability just out of Mantle and the lifesteal from Soul Eater that he doesn't necessarily need to worry about too much, especially considering that the damage output that Spreed has got on their team comp is either going to be one source of burst being the Screen pick. Oh, well, hold on, Gaijin, a little bit of trouble. Layers!
Wow, I know you were trying to drop that so I could cast it, Myth, but too late, bud. That's how quick the kill happened. Guy is done. And Mind the Gap now have 7 unanswered kills. Listen, this is the kind of position, Myth, that if you're in at 16 minutes, it should be pretty commanding. I'm not saying it's an insta-win, it's not a 99%er, but it would take some mistakes for this game to get out of control from the position they're currently in. Now, Pyro belongs to Mind the Gap. Layers and Griff with some pressure.
Wait, what?
Looking to push a bit more, but Heed dashing in. SOT is here as well. There's a leap from him into the stun, and SOT has the ultimate if he needs it as well. But Layers just running, not returning any damage, and ends up juking SOT out of the searing pain by accident, and Spreen gets the first kill of the game for Spreed elsewhere onto Griff.
I can't believe that works out. Spreen looking to get his ultimate off as well. Doesn't find it off the CC from Cthulhu.
What's going on?
SOT, he's W key.
He is, gets the ultimate off in time, and that will be Crimson falling. No reset for SOT, so Wolves lurking for a chance to finish the kill. He will get the Goomba stop. I guess it was worth it to trade his life for it because he certainly is dead here, right? I mean, they can find the last bit of damage. There it is, Wolves is dead. Made sure that SOT paid the price, though, for getting the kill. That's a 3-for-1 in favor of Spreed. That was 7-0 before that fight started, and they get a 3-for-1.
Look, you literally cast or curse them into oblivion. Yeah, it takes some egregious errors to start letting this slip from here. That's exactly it. Lose a team fight in neutral territory and lose the gold Fury on the tail end of it. I was about to crack a joke that Mind the Gap could hand their keyboards and mice to their interns and let them finish out the game with the type of lead that they had. But now we're looking at a dead even match. 17 minutes in, 2,000 gold. Not really enough to feel confident to really push any sort of lead. XP has really started to swing back in Spreed's favor as well. And just to really elevate that, Heat has been under constant pressure the entirety of this game. And now he's a level up on Wolves. He's got his build coming through as well, some of that tankiness. This SOT has been waiting legitimately 17 minutes to even attack an enemy for the first time and finally decides to do so and immediately wins his team a team fight off of nearly soloing out Layers and Griff. It seems like Spreed have just been kind of waiting for their opportunity, and 20 minutes in, it's finally come.
Yeah, we knew they had a late-game focused composition, but I didn't think they'd be able to so quickly flip the switch like that. I mean, what, we were nearing 7,000 gold, weren't we, Myth, before that happened? And now instead, It's more like 2,000. It can't have been that large a swing, but something close to it as Layers leaps in with the taunt that forces Guy to use his bead. So Layers' blink ult is on cooldown for Guy's beads. Probably a fine trade if they can capitalize on that a bit later, but Speed are just walking forward. Where's this confidence coming from as they seem to feel willing to take a fight that comes their way?
Well, they just want to fight 7K down, so this is the best fight they could ever look for, right? Only 2,000 separating them now, so of course I'd be feeling confident. SOT moving up a little bit with the help of Blugan, but this is not the best fight, not the best positioning either. Blugan loses out on half his health, but look at Speed, man. They're springing a trap.
He does experience lead at this point. Now that's a good stitching in Torment. It brings 2 underneath the tier 2 tower, but Heed, who again is level 17, responds by descending into madness. Good luck getting out of here quick. He can't. Spreen puts in the last bit of damage. Snipe from Guy J, bind to home, and that means Solo Troll can jump in, but a great turnaround impale from Grip prevents a reset from coming out. In fact, SOT dies entirely because of Grip. There's my man showing up. Used to be a console main, but doing it on PC as well.
Man, SOT could have pressed 4. I mean, he could have just pressed it one time and he would have been literally death immune. It was 2 shots from Desert Fury, so that's pretty reactable. I think that he just kind of misplays a little bit, maybe disrespecting Griff ever so slightly, saying, yeah, he won't hit it. It's max range. I'm walking out of here every single time, and unfortunately for him, not that time. And this Kali, despite putting out decent pressure, is 0-3 now, hasn't used the I don't even think I've seen Destruction come through yet. And now Mind the Gap with an interesting play, grouping up around this Fire Giant first. Heed and Blugan are here, though.
This is a curious Fire Giant call. They must believe in their confirm with Crimson to start this up, because Spreen have 2 members nearby. It's a 5-on-2, though. This is heavily in favor of Mind the Gap. They've got the Fire Giant lower and lower, and Mind the Gap secured thanks to Crimson's well-timed abilities in the back. As long as they can make it out of here safely, that is a well-worth call. Mind the Gap recognizes a small window where they have the advantage to steal away the biggest objective on the map.
But here's the thing about how it doesn't instill any confidence in me. Mind the Gap are essentially just reinstating that 7,000 gold lead they had earlier on. I like to equate Fire Giant to about 10,000 gold. Mind the Gap now in that lead, but this late in the game, gold means a little bit less. Their ability to strip away these towers means a little bit less. And I think that Spreen have shown time and time again that they're willing to fight into this lead no matter what. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who engages. Sometimes it's Blugan in first, sometimes it's Heed. That time it was SOT. Imagine how this fight goes for Speed if SOT just uses Destruction. I think that Mind the Gap haven't got to play against the full strength of Spreed's draft just yet. And we've just finished up an Oboe on this Kali. The Kinsai is already available, hastened as well. SOT is going to be doing a massive AoE damage inside of these team fights. We just need them to survive longer than 2 seconds.
Again, very possible with that ultimate. We'll see if he elects to drop that one. As Mind the Gap, not even able to get this mid-tier 1 for free. I think Speed are going to try and fight them wherever they can, because this is the smallest the gold lead difference between them is going to be, right? If they give up some towers, it expands out. And Speed, instead, are going to try and make them at least fight for every bit they can. It's a soft defense on this tier 1 in mid. No need to die for that. But they're showing some presence everywhere Mind the Gap are choosing to go.
They are, and it seems like Mind the Gap, a little bit more cautious than I'd like to see them with this Fire Giant push, are going to group up around the Oni Fury first. It will help them just split up the map a little bit, force Speed to react on opposite sides. They'll have to rotate over into solo lane and try and deal with the wave there, or even rotate into the duo lane, and then we can have Mind the Gap either pushing down mid or wherever Speed isn't to try and at least pick up 1 or 2 cheeky towers. But when you have Fire Giant, the rule of thumb is you always want to go for the respawning objectives last because they're the easiest to pick up on the map. So I think I like this from Mind the Gap. They realize that Speed have kind of dropped their group, assuming that the exact same thing I assumed, that Mind the Gap were going for the Oni, so they get a free tier 1. But now Speed has regrouped on the tier 2. We'll see how Mind the Gap decide to play it.
Wow, tier 1s aren't going to cut it. They're going to have to find something else, but Speed are not giving it up for free, right? So far, it's just been the tier 1s. Now, this Oni Fury is a big deal for sure, right? And that's going to spawn them in all 3 waves, going to make it so that Speed have to put some attention elsewhere. But now, with what, about a minute left on this Fire Giant here, Mind the Gap have extended the gold lead by the Oni Fury, and like a tower, that's about it. They've opened up the door to these tier 2s, that's something, but Certainly not anything that Spreed can't fight back into. I thought they had a chance to do a lot more with this.
Yeah, Mind the Gap did as well. They could have at least tried to move in and force out some of these ultimates from Spreed. If you're putting up a soft defense, like Spreed showed that they were, it means that they're not really willing to take a full 5-on-5 engagement. And Mind the Gap has a sustained draft. They've got Erupt Crimson on this Ra who can just heal you up. They've got a sustain from Fire Giant as well. So if they decided to, they could have worked their way into the tier 2 tower, stripped away a couple of abilities from Spreed, and then disengaged themselves, healed up, and then tried again and again, turn it into a war of attrition. But instead, it's just this caution that we're seeing from Mind the Gap, this unwillingness to take an engagement that they don't consider a 100% guarantee, which has lost them out on an entirely huge opportunity. Essentially, this Fire Giant buff was only used to do 2 damage to a mid tower and pick up a tier 1 tower in the duo lane. That's not nearly enough. You fought over the most important objective on the map and did nothing with it.
Well, this is good, though. They found an opportunity to come grab this right side tier 2 tower. Spreed ended up not in place to defend, and in the end, Mind the Gap make it 2 tier 1s, a tier 2, and an Oni Fury with that Fire Giant buff. Not the worst haul, especially they get this free kill onto Bluegan, but Watery Grave allows him to reposition, plus the dash, now the peel from Heed, and Spreed managed to keep their support alive. 3 ultimates on cooldown, with Fire Giant coming up in 30 Myth, that might be more important than I'm giving it credit for, than Mind the Gap have used those ultimates.
Not only those ultimates, but the blink from layers is going to remove a layer, if you would, of engage potential from Mind the Gap. I'm on something else today, Fish. I don't
fire.
know what's
You're on fire,
bud. Yeah, I'm on fire as they group up on the Fire Giant. Okay, yeah, I'm feeling it, bud. And you know what? You're absolutely right. Spreed should have the advantage moving into this engagement because they have so many more cooldowns available to him. Bluegan surviving that situation is almost back-breaking as they move into this neutral objective, and Spreed absolutely know it. That's why they're grouped up first.
Spreed now considering starting up the fire. SOT is still a little bit too far away for their liking, but he's got 5 items, 5 slotted, and that means Kali is ready to roll. Spreed will be the team that's moving into control here first, but the neutral has kind of been given up. Either team could step in and try and find a little bit of positioning here at this point. Still undying to this point are Layers and Spreen, worth noting how safely those two have been able to play this game while still being impactful, as it looks like Mind the Gap backing up here a little bit. Maybe not looking for a fight just yet, or either squad.
Yeah, Spreed missed the opportunity to exploit the fact that all those abilities were down on the side of Mind the Gap. Now it's only the relic usage, and it's going to be the blink off of Wolves and Layers that they're waiting to come back up. Whereas Spreed coming in with full strength, every relic and every ultimate. But this is the weakness of Spreed's draft that we brought up in P's and B's. Their engagement is a little bit one-note and very easy to avoid. That's why all Spreed can really do is look for the objective while using their tools to kind of zone them out. They can't drag anyone out of place. They can't displace them into their team. Guy J is going to have to work very hard in these engagements if he wants to find any damage.
Heed is the one that's being locked down, though, barely able to dash back out of there. So now it's Quig and Wolves who are low. Guy J even able to claim Quig's life before that fight ends. SOT and Layers were near each other, but I don't think either one pulled a trigger. They have all their abilities up, all their relics, so I doubt they really fought. That means Spreed now have the 5v4 advantage, and they gotta use it here. May start up this fire, which they're doing, and force Mind the Gap to come in. Crimson used his ultimate too, so the best steal has already been taken off the table. They brought the FG now down to half. Mind the Gap being zoned by Heed, who's low, and they give up on it. This Fire Giant belongs to Spreed.
It absolutely does. Interesting decision to not try and follow up the damage grift that is on the Heat off that nice pillar stun. But I guess with the vision disadvantage, not knowing exactly where SOT is at that point, they have to back up just in case there's someone coming in to help him out. And Heed gets to maintain his ultimate, the Descent into Madness, for the entirety of the engagement. So now this defense is going to be much harder. Cthulhu is going to be much easier to execute on once all 5 members of Mind the Gap are just grouped up.
There's the Byzantine Torment. He gets pulled in, so he just ults, as you mentioned. Great point, Myth, and now Layers is basically just food. He gets grabbed, Griff gets knocked up and falls instantaneously. Wolves in trouble as well. He does find the turnaround damage on the SOT. He has struggled mightily this set, but I just don't know that it matters. The rest of Spreed are playing so well that they're running over Mind the Gap at this point. Quig will be the next one that ends up falling. Wolves, I think, just got the back off, has rejoined, and Spreed considering to try and step in and find the end. Only one tier 2 tower stands. Crimson and Wolves have got to find a way to defend all on their own. Plenty of damage is coming through from Guy in the back, though. The snipe does land, and I think SMITE are getting cold feet on this one. I'm not so sure. I think they had a good chance, but they elect to fall back either way. They'll take this free pick on the Wolves, though, if they can get it. He's in the CC chain. Nowhere to go.
10 seconds left on layers. It's just Crimson now, and he's so far forward. The damage output is there, but juking well around this pillar, but that's not defending your Titan, bud.
Yeah, Titan is down to half HP. Layers has come back up to try and help defend, but Guy J gets rid of Crimson, and that will be enough. SMITE 2-0 mined the gap in both games. Mind the Gap was able to find a substantial early game lead in both games. SOT, I can't even say irrelevant because he was a liability, but it didn't matter. SMITE won anyway.
Yeah, you don't need SOTs, Freed. You know, we called you the SOT carry project last week, and I think we can issue you now a formal apology for that one. SOT doing his best roleplay, his Halloween costume, going to be those Rock Lee weights, just trying to lock down his team. Not enough this time, though. SMITE find a nice little win for themselves.
Yeah, it seemed to me as though they were trying to get the squad worked up. Hey, we're moving to the circuit playoffs, hopefully here soon, so I need y'all to be stronger. That is exactly what SOT does here, I suppose, to help the boys out. Now, Spring, 3-0-6, a great game from him, a great game from Guy as well. But this is one, to me, where it's more that Mind the Gap weren't picking their spots well enough. That Fire Giant still comes to my mind, right, where they only get a couple tier 1s at a tier 2 and barely get that on the tail end without the Fire Giant buff helping much. It feels like they weren't seizing their opportunities properly.
Look, it's an age-old adage in the SMITE community. If you show respect to your opposition, you've already lost. I've played against these Mind the Gap guys. I know how they like to play. I've hung out with them before. These guys are all very aggressive players. Wolves and Layers in particular, you like to play aggressively, but you bring up that Fire Giant, and I think that's exactly it. They were respecting the names on SMITE a little bit too much. They were scared to go for anything risky, and I think that cost them a lot of their opportunities.
It did. It did feel as though they were playing to not lose instead of to win a couple times here. And I don't want to come down too hard on Mind the Gap. These are players I like a lot, right? I was with these guys in the SCC. That was where I kind of started when I first came here, and I saw them fragging out, and we're just not seeing it from them here at this level on PC alongside everyone else. We know they're capable of more, but we just didn't quite get to see it here. SMITE, though, confidently are your winners, 2-0ing everyone they came into contact with, making their way through the bracket here in Week 4. This is when we brought in the teams to play and see how everyone ended up lining up as expected. Mind the Gap and SMITE made it here all the way to the end, but it's SMITE that are the ones that come out on top 2-0 and continue to impress every time we see them. Guy J happy to step up when SOT not playing quite at the level we know he can.
And we know he can. I mean, last week he nearly drops that 30 bomb inside of the game. We know SOT is capable. Just, you know, sometimes you have a rough week. Sometimes you can rely on the rest of your team, and it's a good feeling knowing that even if you aren't performing to the best of your capabilities, you can rely on players like Guy J, like Spreen, like Blugan to step up for you. And I think that actually should scare the rest of the teams within the SOC. They now know, okay, it's not just shut down SOT win, it's every single member of this squad is lethal.
They know they got to make sure they give this team their due respect. Now, I know you guys are just SMITE competitive fans in general, so stick around. SPL is going to be starting in. Let me look at the clock. 33 minutes, so make sure you stick around for that. And we're going to have the waiting room coming up in just a few minutes as well. That's where we're going to break down everything leading into the set, have some fun stuff to talk about before the SPL starts up. Myth, I believe you're on that this week, so if you want some more Myth, stick around. We'll be right back with the waiting room.